Hey people, I gotta take a second to tell you about something we do around here called the THC Money Bomb. What I do is every 5 episodes, I total up the donations I've gotten in that period of time, and half keeps me and the show going. I take the other half and I gift that back to a random listener. So far we're hitting about 500 each round and I couldn't be happier about it. So consider throwing in $5 or $10. It's cheaper than a hand at the blackjack table with better odds than a scratch-off ticket. Plus, you know half supports a show you like, and at the very least, half will go to a like-minded person who could probably use a nice surprise in these troubled times. When you make a donation, I can see your email address, and that's how I pick the winner. But to keep things kosher, you can also get in the pool by sending your info on a postcard to me, Greg Carlwood, P.O. Box 635223, San Diego, California, 92163. I got no subscription fees here, no paid archives, no paid bonus shows, and I want to keep it that way, on principle. But I'm not a millionaire with the podcast on the side. This is it for me. And I'm the only one I know who's trying to help the people out as well.
That's my man!
So help me help you. If you want to play along, go to the highersidechats.com/donate and get in the game. Dollars, bitcoins, it's all good to me. And that's what we call the THC Money Bomb. Boom.
In the 1930s, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt addressed the nation through a series of radio broadcasts known as the Higherside Chats. His aim was to reassure the common man that our society would recover from its troubled times. But we're far from 1930, and I deal with a different kind of fire. For a new era of worldly frustration, we offer a fresh conversation. I'm Greg Carlwood, and these are the Higherside Chats.
How's it going, people? Smoking a little smoke, drinking a little drink in sunny San Diego. I'm Greg Carlwood, and wow, I have done it, people. We did, really. You have freed me. I have resigned from my day job as a store manager at GameStop. I now run this show and print Conspiracies, and that is it. I definitely took a pay cut, but the support has been huge, and I think this is going to be enough to get me through. I love doing the show so much. Thank you for listening. I love getting more and more people to explore wild ideas and fringe theories, and so really, I work for you now, and I'm happy to do so. If you go to our new subreddit, Higherside Chats, you can request guests and topics, discuss past shows, and we can have a little more of a community going, which I would love to see. And now I'm going to keep pushing to free more and more of you people from an unhappy cog in the wheel life, one money bomb at a time. And now that I have my freedom back, I can work on all sorts of little projects I've been putting off. It's a serious death and rebirth. Probably the most pivotal moment in my life. And what a perfect episode for this to align with. We've got Michael Ruppert from the film Collapse and the new Vice documentary series Apocalypse Man. And Mike's gone through a similar change himself. He's a real badass. He's one of my most respected people. And I was honored to have him on here. So let's get to it. Here's your higher education. And then we're on the other side with Michael Ruppert.
Hi, everybody. Over the past month, I've been visiting towns across America, talking about what our country needs to secure a better bargain for the middle class. Some form of higher education.
In a story that sounds like a prequel to Avatar, at least 8 people were killed when armed tribesmen launched an attack on Friday to stop maintenance crews repairing an oil pipeline that had been blown up last month in southeast Yemen. 6 soldiers guarding the crew and 2 tribesmen were killed in the assault, which succeeded in halting work on the line linking Yemen's oil fields to the export facility on the Arabian Sea. The pipeline, with a capacity of 120,000 barrels per day, was blown up twice in 2 days by unidentified assailants, disrupting an important source of revenue for the state. You can't do that. But these disgruntled tribesmen often carry out such attacks to pressure the government to provide jobs, settle land disputes, or free relatives from prison. Tensions between the government and tribes have been running particularly high since early December, when an important chief was killed in a shooting at an army checkpoint. Tribesmen in the area, of course, have denied carrying out the explosions, but have said they would not allow the government to make repairs until it handed over the soldiers who killed their chief. I would say this is totally reasonable. It seems a bit weird to think about how industrialized modern societies take the stance that, well, it's good for our people, it's good for the community, and they think that tribes are closer to animals than they are people, so who cares what they think? It reminds me of when I went to the Symbiosis Gathering, this desert festival, and there was a local Indian chief there talking about how when us white folks landed here, we set up this legal framework to own the land, and then we'd take Native Americans to court and ask them to produce a deed to the land, and of course they didn't have that. And so with courts and laws and judges and deeds, we pushed them off the land that they've always had, and we didn't have to feel guilty about it because what we did was legally okay. It was morally right because we had the paperwork. That's the little mental trick that they'll put themselves through to not have to own up to doing terrible, shitty things to people who are on the other side of the coin. Modern civilization says, well, we need this land. We need this pipeline. I'm sorry if it's not convenient for you, but unless you have some paperwork that says we can't put this here, then you can just go fuck yourself. Why don't you just go get a car and we'll give you a free tank on us? It's funny because we might think of laws and regulations as devices to provide fairness and freedom, but that's just the cover story. For people who make laws and regulations, they just provide that legal justification for doing whatever they want. I mean, our president right now is a lawyer. How's that working out? Another big thing people are talking about this week is this sudden influx in high-level millionaire international banker suicides, or at least ruled suicides. Now, we've had strings of this before, not much has happened, but it really makes some people wonder if a huge financial collapse is right around the corner. But here's the deal. 5 high-level guys in 10 days. Not conclusive of anything, but worth exploring. Mike Duker, who had worked for Russell Investments for 5 years, was found dead close to the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington State. Probably jumped off. Then a former senior executive at Deutsche Bank, William Brokesmith, was found dead in his home after an apparent suicide. Then the next day, Carl Slim was found dead on the 4th floor of the Shangri-La Hotel in Bangkok. Police said he could have pushed it to the limit. You got it. Mr. Slim was staying on the Brody Stevens, sorry. Mr. Slim was staying on the 22nd floor with his wife and was attending a board meeting in the Thai capital. Then the next day, Gabriel McGee, a J.P. Morgan employee, died after plunging from the roof of its European headquarters in London. Then rounding out banker death number 5, which the police are again ruling a suicide, Richard Talley, the founder and CEO of American Title Services, has recently committed suicide by shooting himself in the head multiple times with a nail gun. Now, these are 5 major international bankers, and some are saying that it's because of increased pressure and investigation by government agencies, but I'm not so sure that bankers are ever going to be held accountable. So that sounds fishy to me. And suicide by nail gun to the head, also a bit hardcore for an old rich white guy. So weird as this all may be, I was following a thread on Reddit about these deaths and saw a very interesting post that was, I guess, trying to shed some light on what the culture is right now for these people. Check this out. A guy named Polite and White on the subreddit Far Right, very fitting, says, I work as a stockbroker for Piper Jaffray located in LA. What happened yesterday left me absolutely stunned in disbelief. I manage the portfolios for more than half of our richest clients, and my boss called me into his office and told me to cash them all out immediately. My obvious thought was that there was going to be a crash, but it sounded strange that he was so adamant about cashing them out. He clearly knew something, so I asked him what was up. He spilled the beans and said, look, we're going into a currency crisis. Major banks are going to default in the next 3 weeks. The stock market is going to go into a violent downward trend, not only here but around the world. The currencies of the world are going to move in every direction. There's no predicting which ones will be standing when this is all over. It will spill into the bond markets here, and it'll be interesting to see what the Fed will do. He warned whatever the Fed did was not going to be enough to solve any problem. When I asked him who told him this, my boss said he talked to a buddy of his who happens to be an executive at J.P. Morgan. I asked what triggers it, and he said that the Chinese trust default is going to cause a domino effect, which will spill into every market and every currency in the world. He also said this coming week will have volatile trading and that this collapse is imminent within the next 3 weeks. Scary stuff, guys. I, of course, don't know, but a lot of people have been talking about this for a long time. They're kicking the can down the road. Chickens have got to come home to roost, or something like that. But let's get to the heart of the show and talk with the king of collapse, my man, Michael C. Ruppert. Folks, we know these are troubled times. Our society is about as stable as an elephant on a bowling ball, and our great society is looking more and more like the worst sickness the earth has ever gotten. We're worried about the swine flu and the bird flu, while the earth has a bad case of the human flu, and who knows at this point if it can ever recover. But lucky for us, the doctor is in the house. Today's guest, Michael Ruppert, has been tracking this human industrial disease for many years. He's written 2 books, Confronting Collapse and Crossing the Rubicon. He's also the leading man in a popular expose most people here will know called Collapse, as well as the subject of a new 6-part documentary done by one of my favorite media companies, Vice, called Apocalypse Man. He's called out the CIA director for importing drugs in a courtroom on live TV. He was the press spokesman for Ross Perot and exposed the friendly fire killing of Pat Tillman. He's the spitter of knowledge, the beacon of light, and the tracker of truth. Michael Ruppert, how the hell are you?
Oh dear, I'm humbled now. Thank you.
Hey man, it is a real honor. You've done some bold and powerful things in your life, and any one of those things is more than most people will ever do. So, you're redlining my respect meter, man.
Thank you so very much. It has been a long walk, and at this late stage in my life, I just turned 63 yesterday. I am. It's a little bit shocking after 3.5 decades of this work to bask and enjoy and receive so much of the recognition that's coming my way now. Of course, it's bittersweet given the circumstances that all of us two-leggeds find ourselves in.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear that you're getting more of that respect. Let's talk about the state of things a little bit. I mean, I've been absorbing a lot of this information about collapse and peak oil and the massive economic crash for a long time now, and there's always such an emphasis on how close we are to this disaster, but they keep finding a way to kick the can down the road. But, I mean, these fracking problems and with the Fukushima fallout, these things are really starting to make me feel like we've already broken the earth, man. I mean, what do you think?
This is a realization that I came to in early 2012 as a result of Fukushima, and this was just as my friend and colleague Guy McPherson, Professor Emeritus of University of Arizona, was concluding, based upon a multitude of peer-reviewed studies, all pointing the same direction, that as a result of global warming, climate chaos, that human extinction was a certainty by 2030. Mathematical science, peer-reviewed studies, but we also have the concomitant parallel problem of 450 nuclear reactors, that most of which are well past their service lives. They're leaking, they're failing. Fukushima is not under control.
Right.
And we are still living in a world of exponential growth, the infinite growth paradigm. We're adding more than 250,000 new bodies to the planet a day. And Mother Earth cannot sustain that, and it was very clear to me in early of 2012 that there was no way from a Cartesian Newtonian 3D perspective to science our way out of this. That perspective has been reinforced and confirmed during the period of time from when I moved to from Northern California here to Southern Colorado in the Rockies. With now 30 plus positive reinforcing feedback loops on global warming,
mm-hmm.
and the still out of control issue at Fukushima, and I within the last 2 months or so, I've had a really fundamental change in my position. We are in hospice as a species, as a planet, human industrial civilization, and more importantly, I think as Terence McKenna might argue, or Daniel Quinn might argue, or Ruppert Sheldrake, or a lot of my heroes might say, that this culture is dying. It is the culture which has to die, because it is a meme which is now obviously and transparently suicidal.
Yeah, that is a really good way to put it. This culture does have to die. I sometimes wonder how much of it, and this kind of stems from my participation in Occupy, which I know you were a supporter of, which is great to hear. Back in those days, the biggest problem was the lack of focus, and I'd hear people talking about this solution or that solution, and a lot of them, I'm like, that doesn't go far enough. If we win this thing and Monsanto's still a company, I don't know how we fixed much. How sweeping does the change have to really be? Can we can we really have the change we need and still have corporations? Can we even still have money? I mean, those are big questions that I think need to be answered, because for the long haul, I don't know that if we keep some of these structures in place, the same people aren't just going to get their hooks right back into us.
It was in 2003 when I was publishing my newsletter From the Wilderness. That's where we broke the Pat Tillman cover up and brought down Donald Rumsfeld.
Yeah.
It was in 2003, as I was deep into peak oil, a couple of years after 9/11. I was riding crossing the Rubicon, that I had an epiphany, which crystallized into, until you change the way money works, you change nothing.
True.
And money is, in essence, God, and that's one of the cruelest jokes of this paradigm. If you look at any piece of paper money, which you can't eat, you can't run a car off of, it doesn't represent anything real. It says, "In God we trust," and the cruelest joke is that money has been and is still, for most people on the planet, God.
Yeah, it is their religion.
And with fiat currency, fractional reserve banking, and compound interest, it is by definition a pyramid scheme. And we know what happens to pyramid schemes the same way that we understand what happens to a species with unfettered growth, whether they be caribou or reindeer on an Arctic island or bacteria in a petri dish. You see this unfettered rocket ship hockey stick curve of population growth followed by a complete collapse. And that is the point at which we find ourselves now.
Well said, man. I actually sometimes wonder, a lot of the things that we've been taught that are innate to human nature, I think, are actually products of our system. You know, they say, like, the competition and the dog-eat-dog world. I'm like, is that just because the only system we've ever known is this warped, capitalistic, crazy, money-hungry, perpetual growth system? Or is that really part of nature? Because I think it's the system. If we don't evolve beyond the system of currency exchange, we'll never really be free, because the monetary system gives us these warped incentives like planned obsolescence and consumerism and extreme waste. I mean, it really is hard to cooperate with people within the system of capitalism.
Well, here I pay great tribute to people like Daniel Quinn and Graham Hancock, who is a friend who I have enormous respect for.
Yes.
First of all, it is a lie, an absolute lie. A paradigm is what you think about before you think about something. And if you automatically start your thinking from a point of competition, dog eat dog is the truth, you are trapped in a lie already. Science has abundantly shown us, and that's separate from the indigenous traditions, which have persevered through all kinds of persecutions, that it's not competition that governs nature, it's cooperation that governs nature. That is, the species that survive are the ones who make themselves the most indispensable to all other species. That's the truth. That's the reality. The second most successful species on planet Earth today is the dog.
Yeah.
The dog.
Man's
everywhere.
best friend.
Because it has cooperated, it has made itself useful and indispensable, whereas, on the other hand, human behavior for, let's say, the last 10,000 years, and there was a fundamental break in human history, something ethical, something spiritual, something archetypal, whatever word you want to use, happened to the human race between 7,000 and 10,000 years ago. Daniel Quinn would call it totalitarian agriculture creating surplus. But man moved into a world governed by fear rather than love, and a world that was hypnotized into believing in separation. That there's a difference between man and everything else, and whoever wrote the first chapter of Genesis, calling man to go out and subdue the world, be fruitful, multiply, manage, have dominion. That's the fundamental evil which has to be cured in human consciousness. This is a crisis of consciousness more than anything else. Before there is any hope or any possibility, and with every passing day, that possibility diminishes, of our species and the web of life on this planet surviving. 250 species a day go extinct. The web of life is being torn to shreds. and mankind cannot exist out of that. From a Jungian perspective, I would say that what's happening now is that all of the shadows that the human race has not faced for 10,000 years are coming home now to either be faced, incorporated, and healed, or to kill us.
Yeah, man, it is scary times. I definitely see that crossroads happening, but a lot of people talk about this awakening, and then I see the Occupy movement get swatted down like a mosquito, and that really crushed my spirits, man. But as a planet, people seem to be fighting back more than ever. It's really tough to know, because obviously there's a media blackout on this thing, so it's really sometimes hard to know exactly what's going on and to get a good view of the landscape. But I assume that you think people are waking up, right?
Well, I am very much aware because I am ever more in the public eye, and my Facebook page is hugely active. That yes, an awakening is taking place all over the planet. There are millions, perhaps even hundreds of millions of people, even perhaps 1 billion out of 7, who grasp that this current system is failing, it's destructive. As Einstein says, you can't solve a problem by using the same system that created the problem. And so I am very much encouraged, however, from the Cartesian reality standpoint, especially now that climate chaos is making itself so abundantly clear all over the planet, we are also running out of time, options, and solutions. So this is indeed a prophetic time, and then I would have to weave in here the fact that I've also studied many ancient prophecies, those of Native Americans and indigenous peoples around the world, and this also does seem to be a time when many of those prophecies are being fulfilled.
Yeah, that's a trippy element to the whole thing too. And I mean, obviously we just went through 2012, which was apparently a lot of people thought that was going to be something, and maybe in the grand scheme of things, on a grand timeline, maybe it was the start of something that hasn't manifested yet.
The Mayans, and this is part of the lie, the meme, human industrial civilization for 10,000 years has systematically persecuted, murdered, massacred, tortured all indigenous cultures it could find, because let's say in Daniel Quinn's terms, these were the peoples who did not participate in the Great Forgetting. I love Quinn's statement that humans have been here for 4 million years, but in this world that we live in, everything prior to 10,000 years ago, we just tie it up in a bow called prehistoric and discard it. Well, that's not true. Mankind lived on this planet successfully, happily, for hundreds of thousands, at least, years without war. And some of the great archaeological finds, like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and many others, show us civilizations and large cities with monuments that were built 10, 12, 15,000 years ago in prehistory. But there are no evidence of battlements, there's no evidence of war or warriors. And in Native American tradition and some of the indigenous cultures, they all talk about an old time when nobody knew what a warrior was, because nobody knew what war was.
Yeah, man, it seems like too good to be true. It seems like old Legends of Atlantis or something, some great paradise that we once had. It goes so against the conventional view that we've gradually got smarter and smarter and that we're currently at our pinnacle. It's harder to believe that now that I see more.
We're
at
the pinnacle of stupidity. I'm sorry.
I agree, man. I actually love Apocalypse Man, and you start the second portion of it talking about technology and how that is obviously how we're using our technology to destroy the planet. But as a conspiracy show, we have a lot of different guests. We cast a wide net, and some of them talk about energy technologies that are suppressed, or maybe even talking about the ancient world. A lot of people talk about ancient societies having technologies that were more in line with the earth. Do you put stock in any of that? Have you seen any evidence to suggest that there could be a different way that would also not have to make these great sacrifices?
Yeah, but I think my explanation will probably open your eyes a bit.
I'm ready.
First, let's deal with this techno fix junk.
Sure.
Like I said in part 2, the automobile was a techno fix because the major cities in the U.S. were awash in horse manure. Fracking is a techno-fix for shortages of natural gas. Nuclear power is a techno-fix for a shortage of electricity also, weapons, and shale oil, tar sands. All of these things are techno-fixes, and all they're doing is destroying anything. So when people talk about suppressed technologies, again, that's a paradigm trap. They're talking about circuits, switches, and things like that. No, absolutely not. None of those technologies. I can lock you in a bank vault with all the technology in the world, and you will not be able to materialize a banana because the atoms aren't there. And 7 billion, 7.2 billion, 3 billion people on the planet now is beyond the Earth's carrying capacity, which was 1 billion human beings, less than 1 billion or so, for a couple 100,000 years, until we unleash the energy of fossil fuels and the Industrial Revolution. However, and I said this on my radio show. I have a radio show called The Lifeboat Hour on the Progressive Radio Network every Sunday, and I have said this very clearly. The suppressed technologies are the spiritual technologies carried by all of the indigenous peoples, the ones who refused to participate in the Great Forgetting, the ones who were not exterminated, and I pay great tribute to all of the ancestors of all indigenous cultures who have gone through unspeakable hardships for hundreds and hundreds of generations to keep this wisdom intact. And I practice Native American spirituality. And I have seen these technologies work, but they have to do with prayers and frequencies and means and methods of energetically relating to all life. And these are technologies that most of the people in the world wouldn't be able to identify or recognize, although many more people are waking up to this power now. But it all comes from healing the fundamental belief that man is separate from the rest of the universe, which is something for us to manipulate.
Yeah.
We need to cooperate rather than compete with the physical world.
I totally agree. I mean, I guess one big thing that skeptics point to that say, when I bring this stuff up or something like resource-based economy, they say there aren't enough resources to go around. And I say, well, I think that might just be a manipulation.
Absolutely not.
No.
We're running out of fresh water all over the world. They are consuming fresh water tables, destroying rivers for tar sands, for fracking, for shale gas or so-called shale oil, so-called tight oil in North Dakota. Our rivers and streams are polluted. The aquifers are polluted. It is absolutely foolish for anybody to believe that we are living in a world that's as full of resources as it was in 1400. That's nonsense.
Well, right. But, I know you're in the third Zeitgeist movie. Their whole philosophy of a resource-based economy is that we should share everything and in an equal way and manage our resources not with a monetary structure, but by dividing it to suit our needs. But you don't think there's enough to go around. So, that obviously wouldn't be a proper solution. So, what do you think we could do as a global community to make things right?
We can't, and that's the fundamental point that we're at. Solution, by definition, again, there's that paradigm trap about hearing the word solution. Mm-hmm. Give me a solution, meaning to put things back the way they were. It cannot be done. Mm-hmm. It cannot be done. There are outcomes, not solutions, at this point.
Okay.
And I stand with Guy McPherson, Carolyn Baker, many people who understand that our species is in hospice. There is no fix for this.
Well, yeah.
Again, until you change the way money works, you change nothing, and nobody has ever changed the way money works.
Right. No, I fully agree. That is the shackle on our ankle right there.
And it is delusional at this point when we live in a world with governments, especially the United States government, that are so absolutely, completely corrupt, venally corrupt. It is foolish to believe that governmental system or economic system is going to relieve itself. And the Pollyannas who say, well, positive thinking will solve everything, they are going to have, Terence McKenna used the term, it's going to be a fire in a madhouse when he talked about the eschaton. And they're going to face the fire in the madhouse. There is a growing movement of people around the world who understand that the human race's time on this planet is ending. Species go extinct all the time.
True. So, I mean, I guess what would you advise to people then? If there isn't really necessarily a solution, what do you think could be our most positive outcome?
Well, first of all, I and so many of us, so many of the great thinkers, and here I include all the names that I've mentioned before, from McKenna to Hancock, all of them, do not believe that the 3D Cartesian reality is anything more than a prison cell in which we have been imprisoned. So our liberation from that prison cell is at hand. I do not believe in that when a human being dies, that's the end of everything.
Of course,
again,
right.
That's the Jungian shadow. That's the ego presenting itself, and it is from that place of protecting and preserving the ego that all of this carnage and horror has come. So, what is happening is that, first of all, there is a tremendous resurgence in an interest in indigenous spirituality, the ways that have been kept for tens of thousands of years, because that's a fundamental truth. Mm-hmm. But it also has to do with things like reconciliation, making amends, and the energetic spiritual attitude. For some reason, a line from Shakespeare, from Hamlet, comes to mind. Alas, Horatio, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Mm-hmm. So I am not trapped, and most of us are not trapped in that place where, oh my God, we're going to die. And that's the end of everything, and we have to frantically blah, blah, blah. Well, mm-hmm. We're living in a world that's been living that way until the credit line is exhausted. We've exhausted the credit line of Mother Earth. Mm-hmm. But what I know from my own spiritual practice, and also from experiences with ayahuasca, DMT, and mushrooms, that there is a wonderful reality that exists outside our consciousness. Mm-hmm. And that's why there's also a tremendous interest in DMT and ayahuasca now. A growing interest in that. I mean, I stand with Graham Hancock and Joe Rogan and Terence McKenna on those pages because I've experienced it. But I cannot offer you a solution that will do anything to restore a world like we knew in 2007, before the economic crash of 2008. Mm-hmm. They just use that as an arbitrary benchmark. That world is never, ever, ever coming back.
Wow. The truth. I'd rather have the truth than some empty positive statements. And yeah, it seems like you might be right. I mean, a lot of people I've had on the show talk about mass extinctions like you're talking about, and this might just be part of the cycle. Maybe we've gone through many of these before. Maybe we're just in the middle of another one.
Well, scientifically, I think that's pretty clear. Carbon levels in the atmosphere haven't been this high in, 400,000 years. Mm-hmm. And the scientific data is very clear that when you get to carbon releases of this level, you can also reach a tipping point where the climate change suddenly comes overnight. 4 to 6 degrees centigrade is cooked in. Humans cannot survive at a 2 degrees centigrade rise over baseline at the start of industrial civilization.
Yeah.
And it's not just because human beings can't adapt to a hotter temperature. No human being can survive a wet bulb temperature. It's a combination of humidity higher than 35 degrees centigrade. But the problem is that the plants and the animals cannot adapt and move fast enough in a totally unpredictable climate. Mm-hmm. When you see dramatic weather extremes, floods, droughts, monstrous heat waves like in Australia where it's been 130 degrees recently, this is only getting worse because at this point in time, what we are experiencing in terms of weather changes is a result of the carbon that was released into the atmosphere 30 years ago. If we consider that, and we consider that mankind has been releasing ever more carbon into the atmosphere every year since, especially since peak oil, as we go to the more desperate means, and more people are on the planet, the worst is definitely yet to come. There's a quote from Guy McPherson. He says, the immediate future is not going to be anything like the recent past. And that's exactly what we're experiencing now.
Wow. Well, I mean, I want to figure out how to best just deal with this transition. I mean, see, I'm living in San Diego. I've been a house cat my whole life, and my girlfriend and I, we've been talking more and more about trying to divorce this system and live off the land in some way. But we're so uneducated in that area, and I don't really have the money, yet we see it's the only real alternative to being conventional. And you're a real inspiration in that area, man. I mean, how would you advise people who want to make some type of change and kind of divorce the system that they're stuck in?
Well, when we made the documentary Collapse, which was released in September of '09, it was fantastically well received. We almost got an Oscar nomination. All the critics loved it. It was a big hit.
Yeah, it's great.
I used the analogy about when a bear attacks a camp, you don't have to be faster than the bear, you just have to be faster than the slowest camper.
True.
Well, that no longer applies. There is no place to run anymore. Global warming is global. And radiation leakages from Fukushima and other sources. Now we have leaking storage facilities at Hanford, all over. There's massive leaks of radiation into the atmosphere, and Fukushima is totally out of control. We have been totally lied to about the radiation that has not stopped being released now for almost 3 years. 3 years next month. And that has traveled the northern hemisphere and saturated the northern hemisphere. It's been falling out in rain and snow for 3 years. The Japanese are still incinerating tons of radioactive waste every day. TEPCO is still pouring hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tons every day of radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean, which is dying. There is no place to run from radiation or climate collapse. So running away, if you will, is great, but permaculture, of which I'm a great fan, which I practiced in Northern California for a while before I moved here, is based upon thoughtful and protracted observation, which means that you spend a long enough time with an ecosystem and a climate observing it so that you understand, but the implication is then that is a stable climate so that your observations will have relevance. Well, tell that to the people in the Philippines who had 4 feet of rain in 48 hours. Tell that to the people in Alaska and near the North Pole, where it has been 20, 30 degrees warmer in Alaska and at the North Pole than it has been in Chicago, Detroit, Colorado, New York. Tell that to the people in Great Britain, where the Gulf Stream current has collapsed. There is no climate stability guaranteed now. And another very competent climate scientist, Paul Beckwith, a professor at the University of Ottawa, is very eloquent on this. He says, and I had him on my radio show a couple of weeks ago, and I made him repeat it. He said, both the frequency and the intensity of extreme weather events are going to increase by orders of magnitude.
Wow.
You cannot go say, I'm going to take this patch of ground and find some clean water, which radiation might be falling into now, and I'm going to make a stand to build myself a lifeboat. And this is, I think, from a spiritual standpoint, a complete blessing for the human race, because it is driving us back to a unity consciousness to make us all realize that there is no them, there is no us. We are all sharing the same crisis. Mm-hmm. And from that standpoint, I'll just say this real quickly. I spent 21 years in 12-step recovery. To summarize what 12-step recovery says, and almost all mystical paths say, apart from a spiritual solution, can I cuss?
Absolutely, please do.
Apart from a spiritual solution, we're fucked.
Yeah. I guess what's sad to me, though, is that I get very hopeful about the prospect of people coming to this spiritual realization, going back to, trying to form self-sustainable communities, going back to the earth. But, it seems like you're saying that go ahead and do that, but we're still all fucked.
Yes. Now, here's the great question. And I think this is so important. The question is energetically how we face what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
From what energetic standpoint and frame of mind we face this standpoint. I would agree with Guy McPherson. I don't see any possibility of saving the human race. There's a distinct possibility, unpredictable from a Cartesian, measurable computer program standpoint. Some humans may survive. There have been other mass extinctions of humans before, 4 suns, as the Hopi or the Mayan would say, when the human race reached a certain point and there was a wipeout, and yet a few survived. There is no way to calculate who that might be.
Right.
But what's critical now is what our consciousness does as we face this, because I believe Terence McKenna had a great line, and I cannot thank him enough. When I lived in Northern California, I just lived about 4 miles from his house in Occidental, California, and I was privileged to know many of his associates up there, and that was where I had my first exposure to DMT.
Oh, awesome.
And this all seemed to have been ordained. But what he said was, we are, this fire in the madhouse, this chaotic situation is the way it always is when a species gets ready to evolve and leave for the stars. In other words, it might not be death as in the end, a black silent screen that's facing us. It might be a monstrously wonderful and beautiful evolution to higher dimensions and higher realms of consciousness. But this is the way it always looks at the end.
Right. It's just a matter of perspective.
And a matter of experience. From my experience, not only with the psychedelics that I have taken, and I have to say that these were always under very spiritually prepared. This is not a recreational thing that you do. There's prayer, preparation, fasting, and all that. These medicines that Spirit gave to us in the form of plants, like and need to be respected. But you can also do this from a non-drug perspective as well, through the practice of spiritual principles, as we know from Alcoholics Anonymous, as we know from Gamblers Anonymous, as we know from Native American medicine ceremonies like a sweat lodge, even to a Uipi, where there are no drugs involved, and yet you experience contact with this other realm. And what McKenna said, for most people, he said, doing psychedelics or practicing spiritual principles is like doing calisthenics for the marathon into eternity.
Wow.
He said most people will be most likely to perish or die from amazement once they realize all of the rest of the universe that we have been imprisoned and kept away from.
Okay. Well, I guess then instead of focusing on the individual survival and taking that type of path, how can someone who's facing some type of spiritual blockage help to clear that out outside of, maybe if they can't participate in one of these rituals or psychedelics, how can they, make a small step in that direction to start feeling something?
That's a wonderful question. That really is a good question. And I tried to do that, approach that question on my own show last week with Christopher Long, who is a practitioner of Native American races medicine man here in Crestone, and he's a very dear friend. And we were talking about that. I think the first stage that opens the door for this is the admission of complete defeat.
Wow. Yeah.
Surrender. In that, once we begin to realize that the political system isn't going to do anything, the economic system isn't going to do anything, but even more than that, 3D Cartesian reality, trying to deal with the whole universe as though it was measured by numbers and measurement, controlled by numbers and measurement, is what got us here.
Right.
So when individuals inside admit that buying a Prius or recycling or getting a bumper sticker is not going to solve the world's problems. You know what I'm saying?
Of course.
Once they admit that system is defeated, then you are at a place of becoming what I would call teachable, open, And this is not about punishment. One of the greatest spiritual precepts I ever learned was the concept of change without punishment. Just let go of what didn't work. There's no need to beat yourself over the head or punish or shame or blame anything. Just stop participating. And I'm not calling for 7 billion people to do something and that will cause the Federal Reserve. No, that's the wrong approach. It's all internal. It's all a matter of consciousness. There is now around the world a large enough community, which you can find from my Facebook page, links to much of it, but you can go to Guy McPherson's page, Nature Bats Last, or Carolyn Baker's page. She's my dear friend, Speaking Truth to Power. These are doorways to an ever-growing community of consciousness, spiritual, not religious. Religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell, and spirituality is for those who have already been there. And so this is a large community, and it's evolving just like Occupy did, extremely rapidly. As I think back to Occupy, I was deeply involved in Occupy Santa Rosa, just north of Oakland, and we avoided major violence there, and I was deeply involved in that. But my experience with the Occupy movement was that in the camps, consciousness was evolving so quickly that became the enemy.
Yeah.
People were coming out of hypnosis so quickly that the imperative had to be to shut down Occupy at all costs.
Yep.
But
I loved it.
Oh, man, it was so warming. And I totally agree. And I was saying at the time that Occupy won't make it because it's got a list of 10,000 demands that nobody can agree on.
Mm-hmm.
If Occupy had gotten to the point where we had all said at the same time, until you change the way money works, you change nothing. Because I think back to Occupy, and I think, what were the demands? Well, something about Glass-Steagall, or something about this.
Right,
and
repealing
about
this and that.
And
ending
if
this
we
war
look,
and that war.
Yeah, and if we look back in retrospect, all of those demands are absolutely irrelevant today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So had we reached that level of consciousness, then Occupy was a wonderful event, but trying to recreate Occupy now, I think, would be we're just too far past that now. There's a lot of the people listening to your broadcast, and I believe you're heard all over the world.
Yeah.
Are trying to survive brutal winter weather,
Mm-hmm.
or big heat waves, or whatever. So, and this is not even beginning to touch the cancers that are turning up not only all over Japan, but all over the Pacific coast, and the fact that much of the Pacific Ocean is dead already. The Pacific seafloor off the Pacific coast of the U.S. is littered with dead species. There are no anchovies. The 100% of the tested bluefin tuna tested positive for radiation, because radiation bioaccumulates up the food chain. Mackerel, herring, the symptoms of the radiation poisoning are all over.
Yeah.
So, and from this point, I guess I would come back to, I'm a warrior. I spent my time, I was a cop, and I spent a lot of time around warriors, and I'm regarded as a warrior. And warriors understand that you fight best when you're certain you're going to die. That's when evolution occurs, not until your backs are completely against the wall. Mm-hmm. Live by spiritual principles or die, because it's alcoholic behavior. Let's say an alcoholic walks into a doctor's office, and the metaphor is he's hitting himself in the head with a hammer, right? and he says to the doctor, "Geez, it really hurts when I do this," and the doctor says, "Well, stop hitting yourself in the head with a hammer."
Yeah.
But the alcoholic will walk out going, "Oh, there's got to be another way."
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah, man. And there isn't.
Yeah, this the thing you just touched on, the warrior fights best when they're facing certain death, when they know they're going to die. I mean, that is a theme that has come out in a lot of things that I really respect and appreciate. I mean, V for Vendetta is one of my favorite movies. It's weird that the mask has been used the way it has in recent years, but I mean, even in that movie, if you've seen it, he locks Natalie Portman up, and she goes through this whole thing where she's pretty sure she's going to die, and then he frees her, and she's like, why the hell would you do that to me? And she's so pissed. She eventually comes back, and she's like, wow, that was a gift that most people never get, and now I'm a real human being.
Okay, thank you. That was great. That was wonderful. And that's exactly what's starting to happen in so many places around the world right now with so many people. They are getting that. That is the gift that comes with this.
Yeah.
And many people are really starting to wake up to this, realizing, 2030 is only 16 years away. Mm-hmm. And these numbers are certain. I strongly recommend that people go find GuyMcPherson.com, Nature Bats Last. The science, 2030 studies, even conservative bodies like the IPCC have got it on the table right now. Oil companies, even themselves there. So there are people who are getting it. Now, I try to live, and I still live by, even though I haven't participated in the 12-step recovery since 2004, I did it for 21 years, 1 month, and 13 days, completely abstinent from everything. I now take the psychedelics.
Nice.
Under supervised shamanic conditions. But you get to a point, and you have heard Native Americans say it is a good day to die.
Right.
Well, that means you're free and you're living cleanly and clearly. You'll put yourself in right relation with all things. You have gone back for your life. You've cleaned up stuff that you maybe put off. You want to be in right relation and a loving relation so that you're free. You're not carrying a ton of baggage. But anybody who has ever, if you will, gotten sober or experienced the power of spiritual practices changing your life will understand that what happens is, I won't say solutions, I will say options that were not visible from the frame of mind that you had before become visible. They disclose themselves. Mm-hmm. Einstein and Carl Jung, who I have enormous respect for, both said the same thing. Once you know there's a God, it doesn't matter whether you believe in one or not.
Yeah.
And it's that experience of the spiritual reality, which is a universe that the human race has been systematically locked away from, imprisoned, if you will. And George Orwell was so right. We are, in the Keepers of the Paradigm and the meme, our own jail keepers in a jail without bars. Mm-hmm. Man. And the idea is to step out of the jail, which is an act of consciousness. It's all inner work rather than outer work.
Yeah, that seems to be the big evolution of the conspiracy movement, the conspiracy researchers, the people I've been talking to is, first, you identify the problems and you're looking at the corruption and there's rebellion and struggle. And then there's finally this spiritual acceptance. And I guess I'm a little young. I'm not there yet. I'm still trying to fight this thing. But, Duncan Trussell is a great comedian. He's a friend of Joe Rogan's. He's on that show all the time. Mm-hmm. I had Duncan Trussell. He was the first guest of this year. And he said something that has kind of stuck with me. And he said, if I was Satan, my goal would be to convince people that if you change external factors, you'll fix internal problems. And I was like, wow, that's pretty profound.
No, it's deep. But that's the essence of, in all 12-step programs. And 12-step has deep roots deep historical roots in metaphysics, recognized by almost all spiritual traditions. The serenity prayer is universal. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. When the spiritual awakening has occurred, one realizes completely that the things that you cannot change are the things outside of yourself.
Right.
And the only things that can be changed are your own attitudes and consciousness.
Yeah. It's funny how much of what we identify as reality starts with our perspective, starts with where our mind's at. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I totally agree. I guess I grew up Catholic. I kind of resist anything that resembles religion and spirituality. I understand they're different things, but I guess I just have a hard time talking about it. It just seems kind of outside of myself still.
Well, here's a good way to look at that will probably make sense to you.
Sure.
If you do the historical work, and this is where a great debt is owed to people like Graham Hancock, if you look at all of the persecutions of the Catholic Church, let's say, organized religion, let's say since the God of Abraham, okay, they have all systematically been directed. The first Catholic Inquisition was not against Muslims; it was against Cathars, Bogomils, Manichaeans, Gnostic Christians who preached and believed the unity of man with all life and a sacred relationship with Mother Earth.
Yep.
And if you do the historical work on that, what you find is that's behind all of the genocides of indigenous peoples all over the world. It's to kill that consciousness. So that's what religion has done. That's not what spirituality is, or let's call it just a consciousness that is aware of the connectedness of all things in the web of life. It's the difference between cooperation and competition.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You're right. I've looked into that a whole bunch, and destroying that Gnostic tradition was so critical to gaining control over the planet and getting into the situation we're in now.
And that's why it continues ruthlessly until this day.
Yeah. Well, man, I love talking. Let's talk a little bit. I wanted to make sure we talked about that transition where you went from Northern California to Colorado. I mean, what led you to leave that community? Because from my perspective, watching you a few years ago, I was like, man, that guy's got it right. I want to go up and set up some kind of community like that where we're farming and we're sustainable and all that stuff. What led you to leave that?
Well, let me say, I've never been happier than I was when I lived in Sebastopol in West Sonoma County, because I too believed the same thing. However, I was in a place where my own evolution had come. I had founded a company called Collapse Network.
Yes.
But I was limited within a company that I had created by all the staff who were there who had built the company to not discussing anything spiritual. And I had absolutely reached a point where I couldn't deal with the world from reading news stories and trying to give answers from a 3D Cartesian political perspective. It was killing me. The company was struggling, and I had a couple of very profound spiritual experiences happen. A shaman from here in Colorado sent a medicine bundle to me out of the blue, which just kicked me in the butt. And through my own prayers, I realized that I had to let go of everything. And I went through a great dying in there as I left. I fired myself from the company. I gave it to the employees. And I got rid of all my material possessions. I was broke. Right. I had no money. I had no place to go. But I was willing to follow spirit that way. And that's the kind of willingness that really you have to have before it pays off. So I lost everything. I have a bandmate. I've been in a band called New White Trash with my dear friend Doug Lewis, who I met in Venice. We've done 2 CDs at newwhitetrash.com if you're interested. And I had no place else to go. And he said, I've got a bed. And he happened to be in the San Luis Valley in southern Colorado on the west slope of the Rockies at 8,100 feet in an utterly remote, and it's a pretty harsh climate here because I'm 24 miles outside of Crestone. But I arrived here in August of 2012 with everything that I own, including my dog Rags, in a RAV4. And I'm still essentially that way. So I arrived here ready to die. I was broken. I had let go of everything. I had believed that I had outlived my usefulness, that I had carried the ball as far as I could. And all spiritual traditions have the concept of the death and the rebirth, the phoenix. And what I found here was an amazing connection to Native American spirituality. It's been a crucible. I'm going to be moving soon into the town of Crestone, which is much more. I'm on a very flat. People, even tough people, won't live where I've lived for the last 2 years. But I'm moving into Crestone. But what emerged out of that sense was that my radio show has become extremely popular all over the world. The Vice series is now coming out. There's other things in the work, but I have evolved. And there's always a dying of some kind involved with an evolution to a higher level of consciousness. And that's been critical for me. And I won't leave here now. I'm going to move into a more hospitable Crestone's, sheltered in the mountains and it's a beautiful community. But it's still very remote. Where I am right now is 24 miles to the closest store. I've been snowed in for 6-7 days at a time here this winter, which has been brutal.
Wow.
So there is always something after what you think the end is, and I think that's a tremendous message to carry. The end of human industrial civilization, I think a lot of people now would get, is necessary. We cannot continue to add increasing amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. We can't run 450 nuclear power plants that we can't control. We can't provide 1 million years worth of safe storage. Mankind hasn't built a structure that lasted for 15,000 years, let alone 1 million. That's what we have to do with plutonium. So that needs to end.
Yeah.
But there is something after that. And it is the sense of wonder and amazement and curiosity and courage that I think is important for everybody to carry now, even as we admit that we're defeated from in a 3D Cartesian reality that is dying and proving to be false.
Man. Well, I think that's an inspirational story. I'm glad you found happiness and came out on the other side of what seemed to be a pretty dark place. I mean, what's great about you, I think what a lot of people respect and envy is that you're just a professional you. You know, you don't have a boss, you don't have a dead-end job, you're free. That's a place I think a lot of people want to get to, even if it's just for the short time we have left, you know?
Yeah, I do what I do for free. I get, $800 bucks a month Social Security. I get maybe well less than $10,000 a year royalty from 2 books and a movie. But people send me money because they love me, and I do what I do for love. And that's a completely different energetic relationship with the source of supply. Mm-hmm. And I will not re-enter that old monetary paradigm for anything.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, that's great. You know, a lot of people can't say, and I didn't want to go into your whole back history because that's out there on the internet. People can get into that. We only had a short hour, and I'm so glad we got as deep as we did. But not a lot of people can say that they've had a real opportunity to sell out and have a cushy position in the system doing nefarious deeds and protecting criminals. And you had that opportunity, and you said, fuck that. And I think that is incredibly admirable. I wish I would be as strong as you if I was ever faced with such a situation. Thanks for being here, man.
The opportunities are always there in any instant for anybody to honor themselves and live honorably. Forget about the past. It's change without punishment. And once you tune to that tuning fork, the benefits come very quickly.
Right on. Well said. Appreciate it, man. Hey, enjoy your day. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And hopefully we can talk again if we're here long enough.
Hey, listen, we do this one day at a time. Breathe in and breathe out, and I would be happy to meet with you again.
All right, man. Thanks. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Wow, what a great guest, people. I hope there's a way to correct the imbalances of the world without a massive human die-off, but maybe there isn't. Either way, I love the guy. Check out the documentary Collapse if you haven't seen it, and you'll have a good idea why Mike feels that we've passed the point of no return. Also, check out the new Vice documentary series called Apocalypse Man. I think the 6th and final part is being released as we speak. You can find it on YouTube. Track Mike down on Twitter and Facebook and tell him it's going to be okay. No, don't do that. I'm just kidding. Well, that said, I've never been happier. This is an exciting new chapter to life. In my whole history, like many of you, a 3-month summer is the most freedom I've ever tasted at once, and now it's just a blank slate from here on out, except for this crazy show and whatever spins off of it. So all those podcasts that have been asking me to be a guest, well, now I'm available. Also, more than ever, people, think about throwing down on the THC Money Bomb or picking up one of the Conspiratees at conspiratees.net. I got a whole bunch of new designs I'm very excited about printing now that I have the time. The Money Bomb's almost at $500, and one of you is going to be getting half of that just for being the awesome you that you are. Can you hear it in my voice? I've never been happier. Follow your passions, people. The internet connects us in ways that we never imagined, and I think the tide is turning towards small business and entrepreneurs and away from the big corporate monstrosities. It's a beautiful thing. Maybe that's part of the awakening. I'm telling you, people, there's a whole world of folks out there just waiting to help you achieve your dream. They just need you to put it out there. Your move.